Well, greetings and again welcome to another session here on Biblical News Updates and Commentary. By virtue of the headlines that we introduced to you here at the beginning of the program, I think you can see that there is a lot of political drama going on around the world as well as inside the United States. And though we could spend a lot of time talking about all this political drama, today I want to just zero in on the political drama that is going on within the United States of America. Now, I don't know about you, but it seems to me that the mainstream media is missing in action, MIA, on a lot of the information that is out there to talk about. I mean, it seems as though if it doesn't have the word sex or somehow related to some kind of potty talk commentary that somebody has made or said, it doesn't seem to make newsworthy items to be put on the mainstream media's network stations. And that's sad because there does appear to be an awful lot of information available that certainly is newsworthy, but just doesn't seem to be getting out there through the network news corporations. And what am I talking about? Well, if you're on the World Wide Web, I often call it the Wild Wild West, you know what I'm talking about because there is a lot of information on there. Now, the downside to that, though, is we have to be very careful about what is fake news, as we've been told, this new term, or what is true. You have to take some time to really vet and look at very selectively and be somewhat discreet on all the information that's out there because, quite frankly, there's a lot of disinformation as well. And you can take off and run down a rabbit hole only to find out that you've been trolled and essentially taken advantage of and to be made to look foolish by virtue of believing some kind of false story or false fact that is really not substantiated. So today, though, I want to take some time to roll back on some of this information and be able to settle in on what we do know, so that we can begin to have a discussion about some of the changes that are indeed going on, because you cannot erase facts, my friends. It's been said facts are stubborn things. That's right. You have to face these realities that oftentimes are indeed illustrating changes. And none of us are comfortable with change. Let's admit it. I mean, we are creatures of habit, and we would much prefer a comfort zone that is not disrupted or disturbed. Yet, nevertheless, as I've often said, there's nothing more permanent in life than change. And change oftentimes causes disruption, causes us to have to move out of that comfort zone and into areas where we've got to begin now to critically think. We've got to begin now to engage in vetting information, evaluating and assessing certain new points of view and outlooks. And so I want to take us down a path today in this session of Biblical News Updates and Commentary to begin to get us thinking about other things or outside of the box that we're normally used to thinking in. Because to be quite honest with you, I too have had to make some adjustments in my own rationale because of new terms that are being used now in the public that oftentimes were relegated to the conspirators, to the conspiracy theory arena, and now is being actually emerging out onto mainstream media talk shows. Oh yeah, my friends, what am I talking about? I'm talking about a particular term that's being used now rather prominently, rather regularly. And you know what it is? You've heard it before, and you know what I'm talking about. It is the term deep state. Oh yeah, deep state. And you may say, well, Bill, what in the world are you talking about? What do you mean deep state? Well, in short, let me explain. In short, deep state is essentially a black ops operation. It is a counterintuitive government embedded in the legitimate voted-in government, but working an agenda against that voted-in government. And in other words, what we're talking about is we've got a counter-government that is working against the will of the people. That's right, working to undermine the voted-in government that is working an agenda that was basically accepted by the people and of which the people voted that agenda into in the majority based on the rule of law that Constitution, and in our particular case, the United States Constitution, affords. And that process has been going on for now some more than 200 years. But the reality of it is, this deep state has been allegedly now identified, of all things. And that's what I'm talking about. Interestingly enough, due to this most recent, and admittedly, I mean, you've got to begin to accept these things, my friends, there is a populist revival going on. And that's what's happening. A renewal. It appears to be some kind of a revival of nationalism. Terms like and slogans like America First, not America only, but America First, meaning America has to be considered in the equation too, as opposed to America always enabling everybody else. And so this new approach, which is foreign for many of us, and for the world too, by the way, because the United States, since in many respects you could make the case some 30 years ago or so during Ronald Reagan's presidency, the world has grown accustomed to a rather weak America, a rather enabling America. And consequently, what's happening now is quite different and causing some disruption and causing some revealings. And what do the revealings show? That there was apparently what appears to be some kind of a deep state operation that was indeed working toward weakening, reassigning the wealth of the United States and weakening the strength and influence of the United States on the world stage. Now you may say, well, but Bill, why are you saying that? What is making you come to understand and draw these types of conclusions? Well, I'm not saying they're necessarily conclusions, but what I am saying is it appears to be providing us the notion that there was indeed a deep state moving and working within the embedded government of the United States. And let me take some time here to explain why I'm saying that. Let me refresh your memory on a name that has now gone off the public stage, but nevertheless you can't dismiss Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Some months ago, back during the time when the campaign was going on and now President Trump was essentially facing off with the candidate on the Democratic side of the aisle, Hillary Clinton. She, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, in the primaries was caught with her hand in the cookie jar attempting to prevent Bernie Sanders, another Democratic candidate who wanted to be president, but it turns out it was obvious and the proof was made clear. Debbie Wasserman Schultz was working nefariously to assure Hillary Clinton would become the candidate of choice for the Democratic Party. Now, interim chairman, because she got fired, by the way, as a result of that, an interim chairperson, Donna Brazile, was caught providing questions for the presidential debate before the debates. You talk about cheating, you talk about being unethical, and then in addition, she comes now here recently writing a book, I think it's titled Hack or something like that, bestseller from what I understand. I haven't read it, but the point of it is I've read excerpts of it, and she really does disclose some of the nefarious activity and corruption that was going on within the primaries in the Democratic side of the aisle. And I'm not talking about politics here. I'm just talking about facts. Facts that we now know based on what has surfaced as realities that we're dealing with. Now, more currently, and what's happening right now, many of us, I don't know if we're informed on this or not, there's certainly a lot of news about it on the internet in the wild, wild west, and so we've got to be careful. But there are facts now, again, that are now illustrating and coming to the surface that prove that the Democratic National Committee, Hillary Clinton's campaign group, and the Office for Action, or the Obama for America campaign group, financed the investigative effort and the construction of, operative, unverified dossier of Donald Trump, utilizing a company called GPS, driven by a guy named Christopher Steele, who, by the way, stated that the dossier was never intended to be public, but allegedly somehow got to become public. And when it did become public, of which cost those three groups that I just mentioned, in some cases over $1 million in getting it and working it through an international legal firm, laundering that money through an international legal firm called Parker Coy, who then allowed this dossier to be constructed and then used for foreign intelligence surveillance activity. FISA, that's right, warrants. And upon getting those warrants, then based on that dossier and information, providing this alleged justification to tap into phone conversations, that administration, the previous one, began to listen in and unmask American citizens, whereby their identities could be identified. And furthermore, was also expanded to afford the other side to spy on the current presidency's activity during their campaigning. My friends, the corruption is just palpable. It is beginning to now, I would think, for many of us, come to our minds to understand just how deep and how serious this is. Because the list of culpable characters that, and here's the operative, allegedly, and don't take me out of context here, because this has yet, I'll say it, to be proved. But the heat is getting hotter on a lot of these individuals who appear to be culpable in the activity of this unverified dossier that was used to grant FISA warrants that provided justification for the government of the previous administration to unmask United States citizens on their telephones, including spying on the current presidential campaign activity while they were campaigning. My friends, this is amazing. And the names that are involved as the potential culpable characters in this particular activity is just mind-blowing. Names like, for instance, Loretta Lynch, at the time, Attorney General, Hillary Clinton, presidential candidate at the time, James Comey, at the time, Director of the FBI, James Clapper, former Director of the National Intelligence Community, Chuck Schumer, presently the House Minority Leader, Andrew McCabe, Deputy Director of the FBI, Robert Rosenstein, Assistant Attorney General, Susan Rice, National Security Advisor, John Brennan, former CIA Director, Huma Abedin, Vice Chair, Campaign Manager, and Advisor to Hillary Clinton, Valerie Jarrett, Senior Advisor to the President at that time, Barack Obama, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, FBI agents who were lovers and heavily involved in the investigation of Hillary Clinton and potentially, I say potentially, the operative, allegedly, if being accused of helping to enable the discarded emails to be overlooked. and to revise the content of the wording of the speech that James Comey used and described using to cut Hillary Clinton loose of any accountability of nefarious acts and or potential criminal acts. And of course, Christopher Steele, the one who essentially was much of the giddy up and go behind the GPS contractors that were heavily involved in constructing the unverified, that's the operative, keep this in mind, unverified dossier. And of course, if all this is fact and if all this comes to be true, obviously, this must include to a certain degree the President of the United States at that time, Barack Obama. Now, let me say it again. If, don't take me out of context here because I don't want to be accused of accusing others. I'm saying if. I don't know yet. I'm just like you. I'm in the bleachers, basically, watching all of this develop. And these allegations are pretty serious. And it does seem as though the fire is getting hotter and closer to the names that I have just listed. So it's going to be interesting to see how this begins or continues to progress toward an ultimate conclusion of either indictments or actual arrests. Because quite frankly, if, let me do it again, these allegations, that's all operatives, are true, my friends, do you know what this means? Do you know what this means? This makes Watergate look like kids' play. Do you understand? Like romper room. I mean, President Nixon at the time in the 70s when Watergate occurred, all he did was have a couple of his cronies within his own administration break into the Democratic headquarters there at a hotel and bug the place. We're talking here of a situation that, if these allegations are true, involves multiple government agencies conspiring to take down the administration that the people voted in. You know, President Lincoln, in one of his speeches over 150 years ago, had a very prophetic statement. He said that if America falls, it won't happen from without. It'll happen from within. Now that's paraphrased, but that was the point he was making. 150 years ago, President Lincoln provided that insight. My friends, we are in the throes here of such a level of corruption that the sad part about this is I can't hardly believe the mainstream media isn't reporting on some of this. You can't even hardly find a story on some of these networks, be they CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, MSNBC. Fox News has some of it, but the point of it is a lot of what is being now coming to the surface and proved as factual, if you're not on the internet, you are clueless. And again, you've got to be careful because there's a lot of disinformation out there. I'm just saying that we are in the throes of something that is historical in nature. And you know what? I haven't even talked about Benghazi. I haven't even brought up Uranium One, where the United States gave 20% of its uranium supply to its enemies, Russia, and somehow hundreds of millions of dollars went into the Clinton Foundation while she was Secretary of State. I mean, I'm not, saying, I'm just saying. I'm just thinking out loud here based on what we're beginning to see. How deep does this stuff go into so many of these spider web issues and items? What about the 30,000 plus emails that have been discarded? What were on those things? Well, they know. And in due course, most likely, we are going to begin to see some of these things come to fruition. Now you might say, well, Bill, look, what are you so riled up about over all of this? Well, the fact is, my friends, the reason I'm riled up about this is this deals with the future of the United States of America. That's right, it deals with the future of the United States of America, because what's become apparent is a globalist agenda was at work within the United States. Now get me right, I'm not talking about Democrats. I'm not talking about Republicans. I'm not talking about independents or libertarians. My friends, I'm making the shift to talk about globalists versus populists or nationalists. I'm talking about one world order movements, one world order agendas versus sovereign states, versus the efforts to maintain borders as opposed to a global village. Now I know, I can't hardly believe I'm talking like this, because in some respects, a lot of this, as I've already said, was relegated to conspiratorial speak, to conspiracy theories. And a lot of this oftentimes became unverified, connected to the Rothschilds and all of this stuff, the international bankers and what have you. And I'm not going there. But where I am going is that the facts are facts. And it is apparent that globalists and their agenda to try to achieve a one world order is a reality. And it is being worked. And it is active. And they are relentless. And they're not going away. It's important we realize that. No matter how vibrant, how powerful the observations we have might appear to be in the way of this promoting of populism, the fact of it is, populism, nationalism, in the end, loses. Globalism will indeed win out. And yet, for now, it would appear that the United States of America is in a revival. The events that are occurring, especially the economy. I mean, I stand here today and I'm one with my 401k, as you are, I'm sure, and that's living proof. And maybe some of you that are watching this have been the recipients of some of those raises that are going on now by companies that you might be working for, $1,000, $2,000, or maybe an increase in your hourly rate where you're working, if you're working for Starbucks or some of these other companies like AT&T. The reality of it is, the facts prove that this populist movement, at least economically for now, first year of this present administration, has proved that there is a positive effect going on and a transition being made, and we're in the throes of it. We are in the throes of a historical movement. And that's why it's somewhat disturbing. That's why it's somewhat disruptive. That's why it's somewhat uncomfortable, because it's not a comfortable zone we're in, because it's not the status quo. It's been disrupted by this present administration. And a light is being shown in the corners of this world's room, so to speak. And a lot of what was invisible, as I said, is now becoming visible. And what's becoming visible? That there is indeed a globalist agenda being worked, and was even at work in the United States. And yet the depth of it, the magnitude of it, the extent of it, remains yet to be proved. But I'll tell you something. It appears, based on information that is percolating and beginning to bubble up, that there will be indictments, that there will be some arrests. And it may get surreal for some of us when we begin to witness those who do end up being arrested or indicted. But my friends, we are in the throes of a change, and we are in the throes of a potential revival of the United States to become a strong nation again in the world stage. And here's the question: how is the world going to respond to a strengthening America? Will they accept it as a positive element, or will they reject it and view it as a threat to their comfort zones? Because you know it as well as I do, there are a lot of party crashers outside of the house. Oh yeah, North Korea's one, Iran's another, Palestinians, they're another. Oh yeah, we've got China and Russia in the shadows, absolutely, without a doubt, sitting back, puppeteers, as they've always been, using surrogates to present and promote their own agendas as they continue to try to counter the West's objectives. And then, of course, we can't discount the effects of Islam and the Muslims, and of course, the Middle East and what is going on there. So there are a lot of potential party crashers that could thwart the direction, that could cause a derailment of what appears to be now getting legs and building momentum in a positive way for the world as well. Because if America prospers, the world will prosper, just by nature of the natural osmosis of goods and services that are provided. But the fact of it is that what's going to happen? With all the party crashers and the potential envy and jealousy and, frankly, hate of what America represents, when in fact America is strong in a sovereign state orientation, is not necessarily in line with or compatible to the globalists. And as I said, there are a lot of globalists. Davos over there, the economic meeting that just happened here last week, is an illustration of that degree of globalism. Because frankly, 90%, if not 95%, maybe 98% of the individuals in attendance of that meeting there in Switzerland was indeed globalist in its orientation. The President of the United States, who's a populist, walking into that is like walking into a beehive, and very counter to his approach. Interestingly enough, it is going to be interesting to see how our world is going to respond to this strengthening of America. Because the fact of it is, though it is very positive, the world might not like it. And as long as there's no disruptions, well then maybe we can have some peace for some time. But that's a big if there are no disruptions. Let me close out by reminding all of us over here in the book of Daniel. I want to bring your attention to Daniel chapter 7. Over here in Daniel chapter 7, in this prophecy, Daniel focuses on the fourth beast. That's the last beast that rises. This is the one that will ultimately fight Jesus Christ upon his return when he comes back to reclaim this planet. And here in chapter 7 of verse 19, he says here, Daniel, "Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, whose teeth were of iron and his nails of brass." He goes on here and he says, this particular case, "and of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the others which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of the horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spoke very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against those Christians. That means this government, this fourth beast, beat up on those Christians. It goes on here in verse 23, Daniel 7. It states, Then he said, The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. Oh yes, my friends, go over here to Revelation chapter 17. Revelation chapter 17, you've got a situation here that correlates there with Daniel chapter 7, where we read here, and the beast that was and is not, and this is verse 11, chapter 17, book of Revelation, even he is the eighth. This is the one that comes out of, another one it says in Daniel 7. This is the eighth out of the 7, and is of the 7, goes into perdition. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings. That's what we just read in Daniel chapter 7, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings for an hour with the beast. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength to the beast. These 10 basically combine their assets, their services with the beast to serve the beast's purposes. And the beast, as Daniel 7 portrays, essentially influences the whole world. And if you read Revelation 18, though it's the description and demise of this kingdom, this Babylon mystery kingdom that essentially does take over the world, you will see just how rich and prosperous and how much of a benefactor it became to the world. Revelation 18. Go ahead, read it there. Read between the lines and you will see what I'm talking about, my friends. My point? Globalism is going to bounce back. How does it? Based on what we know, my friends, stay tuned and buckle in, because there are some wars ahead of us that are indeed going to be very devastating. And we know that ultimately where we're going is into a globalist condition. That's right. The populists and those that believe in sovereign states do ultimately lose their connection and strength, influence, and leverage. The globalists do indeed win. Before I close, I want to offer you a free offer that we have here that we'd like to give you. All you've got to do is hit us on our website at www.cgi.org or email us at info@cgi.org and ask for this. What does the Bible say about the Antichrist? That's right. What does the Bible say about the Antichrist? This is a free booklet, about 55 or so pages. You can read it easily in one, maybe two sittings, but goes into a lot of detail of expanding a more comprehensive view of just what it means to be and understand what the Antichrist is. It'll be very helpful to you, I think, as we begin to enter into this new era that we call the globalists versus the nationalists. My friends, basically, go ahead and buckle in, because like I said, we are in for some major revelations in the very near future. And how the world responds to a strengthening America yet remains to be seen. So prepare yourself, draw close to God, commit your life to Jesus Christ, and we'll see you here again for another session on biblical news updates and commentary.